twice. And then, okay. So this is the path of a registered yoga teacher, in this case of the 200 hours. And so we're talking about the journey from the foundational, what we learn in our 200, and then all of the steps that a yogi can take in their career to professional credentials. And so basically what's starting off with Yoga Alliance is we graduate from our 200, and we can stop there. As you know, that's the standard for teaching at a studio, or generally accepted, is that our YT 200. And, just for the acronyms out there, RYS is Registered Yoga School of 200 hours. RYT is Registered Yoga Teacher of 200 hours. And YTT is Yoga Teacher Training. And CYT is Certified Yoga Teacher, and that is not affiliated with Yoga Alliance. So it's important to know and be able to distinguish these things. So from there, then you have access to a membership with Yoga Alliance, where they have a number of different resources. They have guest speakers, workshops, continuing education credits, and that platform is definitely growing. From there, starting in February 2020, they've initiated an ethics commitment, which I think is really nice. And this reinforces that scope of practice, that code of conduct in the equity in yoga, which I believe is a nice thing to see. At the onset of yoga back in the day, it was created for men. Women were not allowed to practice. And so when we look at asana such as Warrior 1 or Warrior 2, that might not really be in alignment cue-wise with the female body as much as the male body. It might be, but it might not be too. And so that's one reason why I think it's important to leave some air around on how we go about cueing and things like that. Another thing with that scope of practice is it's very tempting. You want to help your student, you want to aid them in every way you can, but also honoring that scope of practice is really big. And that would be, I would say, the launching point for the yoga therapy programs. But it's really important that everybody know that unless they're a registered yoga therapist with that association, that Yoga Alliance does not permit you to even put the word therapy on your website unless you have those credentials. And there was some pushback for that, but I think that it's a good thing in that we wouldn't want people running around saying they're a doctor if they're not, right? And so being mindful of the language that we use is huge. Code of conduct is a big thing. I think that what they were looking for was to hold our members to a higher standard and invite them to hold themselves to a higher standard. So that's a thing. And we see this in many associations. This wouldn't be unique to Yoga Alliance, but certainly a yogi's yamas and niyamas would come into play here. Like, are we playing nice in the sandbox with others? And of course, equity in yoga. And, Edge has always been really big on that and trying to make lessons not only accessible, but flexible and affordable and based on what the person coming forward needs. So for me, I've done one-on-one trainings for over a decade, and I absolutely love that. So I still kind of have that model in the group sessions. Based on what the practitioners are coming for. There's the structure folks need to follow, but at the end of the day, everyone comes to this for a different reason a little bit as individuals. So there's that. Okay, so moving on there. So then we pursue a lifetime of learning as a yoga student and teacher. So we are a student before we are a teacher. Then we want to also make sure that we commit to 30 continuing education credits over 3 years. And so I'd like to put out a call to action. Well, I personally don't offer that much in line of continuing education because I do more on the mentorship side and that sort of thing. I know right now that there's a number of famous people offering continuing education credits, and that might have a lure, but I would just kind of invite everybody maybe to choose a local studio for those services instead. Because those are services that are yogis that we have come to know and love, and we want to support them also as small businesses. And I would liken this much to not shopping at a big box store and choosing to shop locally. So try and choose your local instructor for your continuing education. Again, I personally don't do that as much, so it's not a plug. It's an invitation to support your community at these tough times. Well, tough times for some and growing and blooming for others. All right, so let's get down to the professional track and then what happens. We have some choices what you want to do after that 200, you've graduated. If you see yourself wanting to offer those continuing education courses, then you'll want to teach 1,000 hours, and 2 years from your graduation date of your 200, you will get the distinction ERYT 200. So that means experienced registered yoga teacher of 200 hours with Yoga Alliance. You might want to do that. And in that case, right now, you can currently lead yoga teacher training, although that will quickly be changing, as I think it should be. I don't know that that's necessarily the platform or the standard for leading a training, as much as the more advanced program is for. So your next choice there is you can graduate from a 300 hour, or if you took it all in one, that would be a 500 hour. We don't see that as much. There's some confusion there sometimes with the registered yoga school of 300 hours or the registered yoga school of 500 hours. What that means is, let's say you went to Bali for a month and you took your whole 500 hours all at once, then the school would need to be a registered yoga school of 500 hours. And well, that sounds quite exquisite, and I personally wouldn't mind doing that just for my own benefit. So it'd just be a lovely experience. I think that the reason Yoga Alliance introduced that 300-hour teacher training program is to give folks a chance to take their 200, learn something about yoga teaching, and what it's about, give them some teaching hours and things along these lines, and then the student can choose to take the 300 hours. In either case, regardless of how you do it, you end up as a registered yoga teacher of 500 hours. And that's what we're trying to get if you're trying to do yoga more for a profession or things along those lines. And we'll get to that. The third thing that you can do is you can earn the specialty credential, and that's the registered prenatal yoga teacher or the registered children's yoga teacher. And this is kind of funny because while I always swore there's just no way I'm ever going to take the children's yoga, and I was happy to do the prenatal yoga. In these days, I did just finish my program for the children's yoga. And while I don't know that I'll personally offer a training myself or not, I think that it's a beautiful thing to offer kids yoga and help kids understand mindfulness and things like that. So that really needs to happen. But there will be some changes. So this whole path of an RYT 200 is the premise for the changes that we'll see in the upcoming months or years. And so there will be some future considerations by Yoga Alliance and the yoga community for new specialty credentialings. Just making sure, if we're dealing with prenatal yoga, that's a hard course. Like that's if you take prenatal yoga with Edge, which I'm not currently offering one right now, but in the past, that's a rigorous course. As it should be, right? As it should be. And then the key thing with the children's yoga is their spine's not fully developed until they're 10 years old. So it makes a difference, and their bones aren't fully calcified. So we want to be mindful of things like headstands and that sort of thing, even though they can probably spring up with ease. So those are some things to consider. So then based on which one of these seemed attractive to you, you can then become a continuing education provider. And as I mentioned, this is something yogis would commonly do, and it would partner and pair with things like, yoga retreats, like a day yoga retreat at Starve Rock or in your CECs and so on. And again, we've had this shift where people are going online and, famous people, and that's attractive. But again, I invite you to support your local instructor instead. And so that's my call to action for all of us to support each other. And that doesn't mean, here, it could be anywhere, wherever you live, wherever you're hearing this from. So, okay, so let's say we graduated from the registered yoga school of 300 hours and we moved on to the registered yoga of 500 hours. And I will tell you what it looks like on the Edge side, because that's what this lesson is really about, is what we can do with what we've learned. So if we then teach 2,000 hours across 4 years since graduating our 200-hour yoga teacher training, and then also teach 500 hours after that graduation date, then we're eligible to register as an experienced registered yoga teacher of 500 hours. This one here, this ERYT 500. Currently, it's the highest distinction that you can hold with Yoga Alliance. And it will be the standard for what needs to be in order to offer yoga teacher training. So if you don't have that, there previously was a deadline of next February, I think, 2021. I do think that that will likely be pushed off. I don't think it'll be as soon as that. It might be, I'm not sure, given the times as they are and so on. But the idea with that would really be make sure that if you do offer a 200, if you're a local studio owner or something like that, make sure you get your 300 so that you can continue to lead training, because that will happen. So then as we look here down here in this blue area, we see future considerations by Yoga Alliance and yoga community for mastery level credentials. And this is what I was mentioning, before we went to this recorded Zoom that we're on now. And the idea behind this one is that not only have we gotten to ERYT 500, and earlier I mentioned maybe you did it in 1 month in Bali, right? And even recording the hours is on the honor system. So there might be a benefit to having some kind of certification process or training process or something to ensure that the people that are leading yoga teacher training are qualified to do so, especially when we circle back to those ideas, those fundamental ideas like scope of practice and specialty things like prenatal and children's yoga and things like that, really making sure we're masters of our craft before we move on. So the way we do it here at Edge is our 300-hour yoga teacher trainers present workshops inside our yoga teacher training to our 200-hour students. And so that's how I wrote up the syllabus. I wrote up the syllabus to be that the 300-hour people will offer as practicum the different lessons that are listed on the syllabus on the 200-hour. And I can do that as long as the teacher is listed on Yoga Alliance as one of the teachers. So that's the key. So what you'll want to do if you're in the 300-hour, and really the purpose for this whole conversation that we're having, if you're in the 300, you'll want to go through the syllabus of the 200-hour. You want to listen to all of the lessons that were presented on the 200-hour on our online portal there. And then choose which workshops you see yourself offering with your own take. And again, it's not really as much about like, how can you represent this information that was provided to you? Rather, how can you make your own truth into a workshop using the example that was provided to you in the 200-hour? So that's really just meant to be a template. And I have to say that, some folks feel a little conflicted in that they may get 2 different messages from 2 different trainers in 2 different weeks. But I hold space for that. That's part of the journey. And I believe that yoga is something different for everyone. And so based on what brings you to yoga and what yoga means to you would be reflective of what your work should sound like. I replaced all the shoulds with coulds. So there's actually an exercise, and I'll digress for a moment just because it's such a great exercise. Whenever you're feeling as though somebody should do something and maybe you're wishing they would do it another way, then grab a journal and write, this person should this person should that, this person should so on, so on. And maybe it's even for yourself, like I should this, I should that, and so on. Then you go through and you cross the word should out, you write the word could, and then you go back and you reread all of that. So I think that that's a really nice practice in taking away the expectation of what other people should do, and instead opening the possibilities and the growth and the manifestation of what could happen. And I'm more for that. So that's where I stand with it. Anyway, so as we look into these changes with Yoga Alliance, they've throttled a pause on their credentialing changes because of life in general. And now that they're offering online contact hours through the end of 2021, I would imagine that they'll be picking this back up and making this a priority for folks so that we know, well, what do we do in 2022? In the yoga teacher training world, that starts promoting 6 to 8 months out. People usually need time to make a commitment of 200 or 300 hours worth of training. I had the privilege of being or the honor of being on a live Zoom the other day in a training with Leslie Kaminoff, because I took his principles course, which is amazing for those of you offering yoga teacher training. Leslie Kaminoff can offer your anatomy for you, and it's a stellar course. Anyway, so I'm on the live Zoom, and he's talking about the contact hours. This is the day before Yoga Alliance announced that they'll allow these online hours. And he's basically saying that in the world that we live in, at the end of the day, Yoga Alliance is just going to need to have a contact hour be something like what we're doing here, where it be a live interaction And as time goes on, figure that out then. So what I would start to expect to see, and based on the memos that came out from Yoga Alliance yesterday, I would expect to start to see some pre-recorded material and some live interaction. And there's advantages and disadvantages to both sides, and I'll talk about both of those. And then that way you can get an idea of how you might want to present, what that might looks like, and what's the platform that we're going for and what we're trying to do based on these ideas. So from the ERYT 500, some of these changes we'll see coming forward, I would expect in the next 24 months or less, is to become an assistant teacher trainer. So what Edge aims to do at that 300 level is then have somebody assist throughout one of our trainings, which might look completely different what they would offer, and that's okay. Like, that's totally great. And then get a certificate, a practicum certificate for that at the end of that, to show that yes, I did have a mentorship experience, I did have a formal training experience. And then generally speaking, what Edge has done, or I'm sorry, what Yoga Alliance has done over the years is they've grandfathered in the people that have already been doing what needs to be done. And then as of a certain date, it changes. And I'm not psychic, so I can't say for sure exactly if that's going to go down, but we can't just take away everyone's credentials, because nobody would lead the teacher training for the teacher trainers, right? So I would kind of think that there would be the structures in place for this, how to lead a yoga teacher training. And I mean, that's definitely my jam. That's what I love to do. But for those of you that love to build programs and things like that, if you're in the 300 hour, it would be a really nice thing if you wanted to put together a program of your own, whether that be online or in person or whatever that may be, to help develop your professional career, because it will be something that's needed and definitely sought after. And I can tell you, I've made some great decisions, and I've made some very expensive decisions, and so having that mentorship piece, I think would be the platform that Yoga Alliance really sets their criteria on. So that's what we're trying for. And then from there, each practitioner makes it their own always. And then from that, only after becoming the assistant teacher training will become the lead teacher trainer. And this is not how Edge started. I didn't even have my ERYT 200 when I launched my first Yoga Alliance. I actually had a trainer who had that distinction, and she offered the majority of the lead offers, and then hours, and then I offered the rest, and that's how that went down. And I think that Yoga Alliance is trying to get away from that and trying to make sure that everybody that's leading yoga teacher training is doing so as an ERYT 500 level. Whether I do or do not agree with that modality, I don't think it really matters, because it is what it is, right? So they've already announced, I think, a fresh set of eyes brings holds space that we don't see with somebody who's kind of been doing it their own way for a while. So I like to bring in new people to sprinkle in some seasoning, but at any rate. So as we consider about what these are going to look like, then we want to consider what are those workshops that we want to teach, how do we want to go about teaching them, and then talking about this as well. And so in our Slack community yesterday, I posted, and if you're watching this pre-recording, then you can, ask me for that link. Haley went through and she did a really nice job on how to offer yoga on YouTube channel. And she kind of went over some of the basics and tips on recording tips, things you want to make sure happen, how to publish, what happens then, what does it look like? Are you going to make any money? Not right away. It takes some time, these sorts of things. But when we go back to the contact hour, circling back to our conversation with Leslie Kamenoff, that contact hour needs to be, something interactive and live. There's also a benefit for it to be pre-recorded. One, I find that sometimes people might be on a live training, but maybe be kind of checked out. And I've done it. I've been on trainings all of 2020. I've just taken one training after another. I did the Ayurveda, I did the children's, I did the anatomy principles course. And, for me, that worked out really nice because I was able to take them on my own time with my own energy and interest levels when I wanted to. I could pause and rewind and watch again and things like that when it was pre-recorded. But unless it had my full attention in a live session, I then sort of lost that. And so good, bad, either way. In the live training, people check out. you know, I've been doing this a long time, even when they're in your classroom, you know, you could see they're in another land and not with you currently, right? And so we might hear the student or the teacher say, let's all just get up and move a little, right? Re-engage and then settle back down and go back to lecture or theory or whatever it is you're teaching. And so in that way, a recording, I think, can be superior if there's a call to action to the recording. So when you're thinking about how to put together your workshops, if you're in the 300-hour program, the recordings has its purpose in its own right, in that there's no audio visual interruptions, right? The person that watching it is presumably watching it the way they want to watch it. And there are some apps out there that can pause the video, pop up a question, or a quiz even, that the student then has to answer in order to finish watching the video. And then through that process, if you've enabled like Force Watch, like our online portal Teachable, I highly recommend it to anyone offering training. It's excellent. You can do a Force Watch, so that it has to be watched. They have to go through and answer the questions. They have to go through and answer the quizzes and so on. So this is a nice model to ensure that the information is not only being shared, but received and engaged with. And I would say most likely Yoga Alliance's main concern on why they haven't allowed online training before, because how do we get this piece done? So I've already told you just now how to get that piece done. You can inlay that in some videos that you've recorded. There's a downside to it. I think the downside to that, and I know I can speak for myself, is I really want to learn from a relaxed place, right? And being quizzed on pop-ups every few minutes can be agitating and even stressful and might suck the joy out of the experience. And so if you know me, you know my number one goal is joy. Like, can we find the joy within this process? And even if that means that you've taken this whole 200 and maybe you checked out for 30 or 40% of those lectures that were delivered online and you weren't really present, hopefully you come back around and watch that again when you find yourself wanting to offer a workshop or a retreat or a training or whatever it is. A series class is a 6-week series is a nice time to inlay these ideas to keep your content fresh, rather than always Googling for other people's information, coming back to home and finding what your truth is and sharing that. So good and bad. I do feel like I've had some programs that I'm taking, and I won't name which one's which, other than Kamenov is amazing, so not that, but I have taken some training this year where I felt that compliance was definitely ensured. There was no doubt that I was present, I was there, I watched it, I was, you know, maybe I was muted, my video was off and all of that, but I wasn't really in it. You know, I was physically there. I showed up for class that day. Right. So there's a downside to this live Zoom thing. The other piece of it for those pre-recorded versus not is I've been playing around with different models in our Slack where at this time of day you can expect a lesson. So let's say today's Sunday from 12 to 2, something will happen. If you miss it, there might be a recording, there might not be a recording, depending on if it was a lab, a lecture, or a practicum. We'll break those down briefly as we cap up these ideas. So one thing about having the recording available is sometimes 12 to 2 doesn't work for other people's schedule. They're early birds. I'm not an early bird. I don't have any morning yoga teacher training at Edge at all. Nothing starts before noon, and we have a couple of evening and we have weekend. We do it every day except one day a week and so on. That way people can come when it works for them. But the other side of that too becomes maybe they want to be present for the live training, but they're not really present for the live training. And so there's a conundrum of sorts, like how do we do it? How do I, as a yoga school, know that the person that's coming online, that's working towards these very serious credentials that we're talking about, this ERYT 500, and putting my name on that they went to Edge for their 300, and making sure that's a respected credentialing, and also find the joy. This is where I find like the blend. For me, this is my end answer of how I'm doing it at this point. And I'll let you know as I update it, explore new things, and have different models of how other people do it and try things out. But I think that I'll have a movement more to live videos that are recorded, but then posted, And so if you didn't come to the live session and you went to the recorded session, then perhaps there's like a journaling reflection, or perhaps there's some call to action or some sort of activity or some kind of fill in the blank to just ensure that they watched it, they got it, they were able to take away the key components of what I was after on that given day. And this has been my favorite model because I feel like I can get creative and playful and fun with the different calls to action on what people do, rather than like one laborious thing. Like at the end of chapter, you have to fill out the chapter end that's in any textbook in the world. You know, maybe we do that one day, but the next day we do a journaling reflection, and the next day we do a project, or the next day we do a record a video, whatever that might be, and holding space for the different skills that people that are having on the training platform can enjoy and be inside. So that's kind of the way the 300-hour YTTers can think about how they want to do it. One piece is the practicum piece. What I've just described was lab. Lectures are lectures that we've been recording, you know, since spring, and they're just sitting in our online portal at michelleraysobey.com, and they're there, and that's where you earn those hours. Nothing else to do there. And then the lab is what I've described, and then this last piece is the practicum. And this is, again, something Yoga Alliance really wants to make sure that we get down and we figure out before they add this to their credentialing process is, how do I know that you got it? Right? Especially if I've left some air around the lesson on the lab side, whether it be a journaling reflection or a call to action or something, like, how do I really know that you have it, so that when you go and, you know, open a studio or apply to a studio or teach your loved one, that you're doing so you know, with the training that you came for, right? Especially when we get about that halfway mark, it seems like it's going to be forever yet, but I'd say the back half goes by much more quickly than the front half does, generally speaking. The front half of training is take an observation role, kick back, watch, see how we do it. And the second half of training is more about, you know, okay, I'm going to take a leadership role. I'm going to start practicing some of these things that I witnessed on the first half. That's just how Edge does it. Different people do it different ways. But this practicum piece is then maybe we come on live Zoom, and, you know, at our structured times, and then we send people into breakout rooms so that they can have an activity, a chance to practice and things like this. And so I think that there's real value in that practicum side, and also on not such a large platform, because Edge is big. We have a lot of trainers, we have a lot of students. We just hit 100 students, so now we're sold out until people graduate, and now you can only really get in when somebody graduates. So that's how that happens. And as such, I work directly with the trainers, and the trainers work with the students. And I come and I make cameo appearances, but I'm not like a general lead instructor for the majority of the 200-hour yoga teacher trainings, because my heart is teaching the 300-hour peeps. That's what I love to do. Like, what brought you here and how can I help you get there? What are you looking to do? That's the goal. So anyway, as we break out into these breakout rooms, then trainers can go into the breakout rooms with the students as they have a chance to say, this is what my warrior two is it being expressed like today, and feedback and so on. And, you know, I see the foot is placed at 45-degree angle. Is it comfortable there? Would a wider stance help you find more alignment? And if you really have a strong hold on your anatomy, which that's our focus at Edge, is we teach from the place of anatomy, then we would know what the cues are, the modifications might need to be, or the qualities might need to be. The qualities help advance the posture. We would know these things because we know our anatomy. And that's, it goes a long way versus, I would say, the idea of memorization. You know, if we're memorizing, the foot goes here in this asana and so on, right? Like, understand the anatomy of the human body, which is universal mostly. And then how do we go about accommodating each practitioner as they come to us so that they can find the posture within them, and how do we express that? So that's what I love to do. That's my jam. That's usually where I am, hanging out with the 300-hour folks. And I think that this is a lovely service to provide for people. You know, we do try and offer affordable tuition, and I do so with the hopes that there will be a pay it forward kind of thing, that graduates of this program will go on to offer maybe even just once a month community class, or perhaps seek out populations that are underserved or don't have access or might really need, and just always kind of keep something available to help serve their community, right? So that's what that seva means. It means to serve, right? So how we go about doing that. Okay, so those are some of the key things about this path of the RYT. So I'm going to wrap up the recording piece, and then that way we can do a live Q&A and you don't have to worry about being recorded. So I'm getting efficient in my processes here, so I'm not repeating the same information 6 times a week. So hold on here.